Hello Cloud Gurus, I'm Nigel POULTON and welcome to Kubernetes this month. Now, first and foremost, of course, I hope that everyone is safe and well. However, we'll start the show with our usual Kubernetes news roundup. We'll pick a couple of those things that look interesting and we'll dive a bit deeper. Then we'll round the show out with a chance for you to win a goodie bag with our Guru of the Month section. So grab a comfy seat and get ready to enjoy. First up in the news, Kubernetes 1.18 is here, and it's got a strong stability and maturity theme. Again, that's becoming par for the course these days. Well, we'll take a closer look in the deeper dive section. Out into the ecosystem though, and Rancher Labs has raised another 40 million in a Series D round of funding, bringing total funding to around 95 million. Now, the most recent round includes several former investors plus Telstra, Australia's largest telco, as the lead for the round, or at least their investment arm, yeah? Either way though, they obviously like what they see with Rancher, as they're also customers. Sticking with Rancher Labs, they just released Fleet as an open source project for managing fleets of Kubernetes clusters. So in a very general way, right? Kinda treating Kubernetes clusters like pods, kinda almost. Anyway, this is yet another interesting project from Rancher, who just seem to have this deep culture of bringing very cool projects to the ecosystem, things like K3S and the likes. Moving away from Rancher to Docker. After having sold their enterprise business to Mirantis and promising to focus on developers, Docker Inc. just announced that they'll be focusing on Docker Desktop and Docker Hub to make it easier for developers to get from code all the way to the cloud. Plus, they published their roadmap on GitHub, which is pretty cool. Istio recently announced version 1.5, which is a pretty big release, and we'll look more at that in a minute. Now, some of you might remember we said goodbye to Containership last year as they folded the business. Well, it seems Hitachi Vantara has acquired their IP and assets. So Hitachi Vantara is basically Hitachi Data Systems, or HDS, the data storage subsidiary of Hitachi in Japan. And they're doing what a lot of traditional enterprise vendors like NetApp and VMware are doing. They're on the acquisition trail looking for ways to get in on the Kubernetes game. So it looks like they've acquired the tech behind the Containership Kubernetes Engine. Now, speaking of enterprise vendors and Kubernetes platforms, HPE, the enterprise edition of Hewlett-Packard, announced general availability of their own Kubernetes platform called the HPE Container Platform. VMware vSphere 7 is also here, which is VMware's biggest re-architecture of the vSphere platform to date, and all to make containerized workloads first-class citizens. So vSphere 7 loves containers and Kubernetes just as much as it loves VMs, and it's trying to make all of this as simple as possible for VM admins. Now, last but not least in this relatively slow month for Kubernetes news, Kubeflow, Google's solution for deploying machine learning workloads to Kubernetes, that got a 1.0 release. Okay, in this month's deeper dive section, we'll look a bit closer at Kubernetes 1.18, Istio 1.5, and Docker's new focus. So like I said, Kubernetes 1.18 hit the streets, and it's got that familiar feel of more maturity and more stability. In fact, the blog that accompanied the release on the Kubernetes website referred to this version as fit and finish, suggesting to me an improved customer experience. And you can see why, right? I mean, there are 15 features or enhancements that are moving to stable. Well, for me, 3 things stand out. 1, the kubectl debug command is coming, and I for one can't wait, right? So as someone who builds and trashes a lot of clusters for testing purposes, a dedicated kubectl debug command acting, I hope, right, as a single place for deep and powerful troubleshooting, it just can't come soon enough. Now, it's currently in alpha, so it's really early, and I'm not sure we even really know what it'll look like when it finally goes GA. But please, oh please, make it more than just a beefed up kubectl exec. Anyway, the second thing that caught my eye was Topology Manager going into beta. Now, if you don't know, just think of Topology Manager as like souped up scheduling and resource allocation, but all joined up and working together with as well awareness of pretty cool hardware accelerations like SRIOV and a bunch more. The third thing that caught my eye was more on the be aware or the warning front, right? 1.18 includes some pretty major deprecations. Obviously, check the docs for the full list, but 1.18 will no longer serve anything from the apps v1 beta 1 and the apps v1 beta 2 APIs. So start getting all of your manifests and the likes onto apps v1. Okay, so Istio 1.5. This is a pretty big release from Istio on a few fronts, right? Yeah, it's probably got the most changes we've seen in a point release for quite some time, but as well as lots of changes, some of them are pretty huge ones. Now, I'm going to start with Istio D. So the whole Istio control plane is being consolidated into a single binary called Istio D to make it easier for operations and the likes to deploy and troubleshoot. Now, they're not changing the way that you interact with the API, and of course they're not changing how the mesh works or anything like that. This is purely to make deploying and troubleshooting installs and the likes much easier. Though, I'm sure this is not wasted on you, right? A major cloud-native application is re-architecting itself to be more monolithic in the name of simplification. So, if there was ever proof needed that microservices can sometimes make life harder, this is it. On the functionality front, they're implementing WebAssembly to merge their own mixer-based extensibility model with Envoy extensibility. So going forward, okay, in Istio, all extensibility is going to come under a single roof of WebAssembly. Big tick there for simplification. They're also making it easier to deploy Istio from the command line through some major improvements to Istio CTL. Last but not least on this month's deeper dive section, Docker follows through on its promise to become more developer focused now that it's sold its enterprise business. So Docker has identified difficulties in getting from code all the way to the cloud, and it wants to make that easier for us. So in the upcoming months, we should expect to see major changes and improvements to Docker Desktop as well as Docker Hub. Now on the Docker Hub front, this scares me a bit, okay, because I love Docker Hub in its current format, but Docker Hub is slated to become way more than just a registry. My guess, okay, is more like Docker Trusted Registry if you'd ever used that, okay? So things like image vulnerability scanning, plus a bunch of pipeline stuff to help us get our code and images through complex workflows and deployed to the cloud. Now, I wish them luck with this, and I hope that they can nail it without straying from what is already a great tool. Well, on the Docker Desktop front, we should expect features that make it easier to onboard new developers to your teams and to integrate those new developers to your workflows, plus a bunch of team collaboration stuff. And if you want to know the specifics of what's coming, they've published their roadmap. And that, gurus, wraps up the deep dive section for this month. Okay, Guru of the Month. Last month I asked which technology current versions of Kubernetes use to get from service IPs to pod IPs, and the answer was IPVS, or IP Virtual Server. And honestly, we got some great answers, including an absolute belter from Supercat. But the winner this month is Mohammed Shoaib Ul-Haki. Now, I probably didn't pronounce that right, but you know what? What's important is that Mohammed got the answer correct. In fact, he gave a great answer. So, Mohammed is a software engineer from Bangalore in India. And Mohammed, mate, you'll be getting a goodie bag in the post. And as always, a huge thanks to everyone else who gave answers. I love reading them, and you know what? I often learn a thing or two from your answers, so that's cool. Anyway, this month's question is in the forum link below. Stay safe, and I'll see you next month. Same cube time, same cube place.